And a walk can provide a surprise at every turn, and distant beautiful views in almost any direction.
But there are also beautiful scenes almost directly underfoot. These, for instance, are bluebells of Scotland.
Mixed in with the bluebells is yarrow, and there in the same square foot with the other two is northern goldenrod. Just a few feet away is yellow paintbrush. A little further along is some blue lupin. With every change in elevation, there's different vegetation. These are lichens. This is a soapberry bush. We're focused on some of the berries. In another month, these will be bright red. If you beat them up with water, they get very sudsy and frothy. This soapberry bush was just full of ripe berries a few days ago. Their absence and the pile of seed-filled bearscat up the trail indicate that a bear's been by here. Alaska is studded with interesting rock formations. A lot of the mountains are essentially solid rock, with narrow bands of soil here and there that will support vegetation.
A surprise. Bears aren't often seen at these elevations. At this time of year, they're usually down at the river for salmon. Just back of us, there is a valley migration route for bears, moving from place to place around Cooper Landing while avoiding people.
We're right at timberline, but any place that it can find soil, vegetation continues right to the top of the mountains. These spruce trees are not very tall, but they're older than their height would suggest. Look at the thicket of pine cones in them. This little spruce is about 3 feet tall, but it's loaded with new growth and cones.
2 eaglets perched above their nest in a giant cottonwood tree. Their flapping was creating enough thrust to raise the limbs they were on, and their parents were coaxing them to fly, but it took 2 weeks for them to get up the nerve to turn loose.
We're down off the mountain now and along the edge of Kenai Lake, roughly where the lake ends and Kenai River begins.
Kenai River is a world-class fishery with over 30 species of fish and huge Pacific salmon runs. The world record 97-pound Chinook salmon was taken here.
Kenai Lake used to be the only way to get to Cooper Landing. You had to take a train up from Seward or down from Anchorage, get off at the other end of the lake, and take a boat the 20 miles down the lake to reach here. Our friend Rusty Halverson was one of the people who first came to Cooper Landing by railroad, followed by boat. That was back in the 1940s. He fell in love with the place, bought out an old fox farm on the lake, built a house, and lived there. This is the trail we use to get up the Russian River for fishing. Feet and floods over thousands of years have bared all these rocks that you have to pick your way among.
On this trail, the sound of the river is always strong in the background. Today there's a sockeye salmon run, one of the most amazing sights in Alaska or anywhere. Rarely seen in this intensity, the run had slowed because of low water, but then a rain brought the river up and they came pouring in. Also, it seems big runs often come at night.
At the end of the run, the salmon turn red and spawn. The grinding sound is salmon using their tails to make nests called redds, spelled R-E-D-D-S. The rattle of gravel through the water indicates salmon nearby busy at that. Once ready, the females drop their eggs into the redds, the males release milk to cover them, and they push the gravel back over the fertilized eggs so they won't wash away or be eaten by trout.
The soil along the Russian River and along parts of the Kenai is almost solid, pure peat. It sounds hollow sometimes when you walk on it, and you can see the soil compress under your feet and spring back as you lift your foot.
One of the things that makes the Russian River so beautiful is the profusion of ferns that line the banks. This is a tight spot in the trail that lasts for probably 50 or 60 yards. Some fishermen were fishing in the hole behind us once, and we were coming up the trail, and a little black bear came out on them. They became hysterical, and then the bear became hysterical, and they went flying down this trail, and we passed each other at one of the tightest points.
This is one of our favorite plants, and here on the Russian is the only place we see it. It's called monk's hood, and you can see how it got the name because of the shape of the flowers. It's poisonous. It has digitalin in it. This yellow flower is an avens. There are several kinds of avens in Alaska, and this is what's called the large-leafed avens. This avens is readily recognizable because of the round seed pod that's left after the bloom is gone. Large-leafed avens seed pods. A friend of ours identified this plant with all the tiny white flowers for us as Alaska baby breath. This currant bush is just loaded with currants that are half ripe. From underneath like this, you can see that their shape is pods like grapes. They make wonderful, clear, translucent, almost transparent jelly. There are at least 4 kinds of currants in Alaska, and 3 of them grow along the Russian River. Those are the red currants like these, and black currants, and skunk currants. The red currants and black currants are edible, and the skunk currants are not, as you might guess from the name. The skunk currants used to give us a scare. There's a place up here on the river not far above here where every time we passed we smelled a really terrible smell, and we thought it was a bear somewhere in the vicinity. But we finally got to looking around and found that a bush of skunk currants was growing there, and that was the source of the stink. Almost any outdoor activity in Alaska has to be shared with bears.
That is a big bear there, man.
This brown bear sow is agitated because she found a fisherman in a hole she brought her 3 cubs to, and she's just chased him away. She's clicking her teeth and yawning and whoofing, which are all dead giveaways. This watermelon berry plant is also sometimes called a cucumber plant, and the plant itself as well as the berries are edible. These are just about half, maybe a little more than half their full size, and they haven't started to ripen yet. These baby spruce grouse are well camouflaged. They're also completely oblivious to our presence. They're just going about their business, and in the process one of them walked right over my foot. Their mother is equally relaxed. This particular chick was a little bit too relaxed and eventually fell out of the tree. Alaska is full of what is called microclimates, areas really close together where the climates are really different. One of those is the canyon here on the Russian, which is just upstream of us. We were up there yesterday, and not only were there no berries, but the watermelon plants were just coming into bloom because it's narrow and it gets almost no sun during the day. If you look closely, you can see why these watermelon berries are also called twisted stalk. They grow from a dog-leg stalk that comes out of the base of the leaf bottom. This plant with the feathery bloom spikes is called Sitka burnet, B-U-R-N-E-T. You would never know it from the appearance of it, but it's a member of the rose family. If you look closely at the leaves, though, you begin to see that rose relationship, and the real clincher is the fact that if you pick that bloom and smell it, it has an absolute rose scent to it. Alaska animals focus on hunting food and don't pay much attention to people. This one was stalking a pine squirrel. This little bear was also focused on food, but only for itself. He and his mother came up behind us on the river, and she walked calmly on into the water, but he turned and growled at us. They went down river and we kept on fishing.
After a while, we heard the greatest fracas or commotion we'd ever heard in outdoor Alaska. A bush opening showed it all. We were astonished to see that it was the little bear, with the volume of a trumpet, demanding a whole salmon instead of the piece that had been given by its mother. The white collar, by the way, is not usual on cubs, but not all that rare. The cub gave us a long, steady look and another growl before leaving, the most hostile bear we'd seen in decades on the river. The most prolific and spectacular flower in all of Alaska is probably the fireweed. It blooms in huge swaths of color. It really ought to be the state flower instead of the forget-me-not. We really love the fireweed, but we always hate to see those blooms start opening and moving up the stalk, because the legend is that when they top out at the top of the stalk, winter is here.
These are low-bush cranberries. They grow all over the place.
Their ripening must be related to the sun because they're green underneath on the shady side.
These are very low growing and they make a good ground cover. There are very few lawns in Cooper Landing. We have a friend who has just let the low-bush cranberries cover her place.
Low-bush cranberries are in the same family as lower 48 cranberries. They have about 24 names, including mountain cranberry and lingonberry. A plant called a high-bush cranberry also grows along the Russian River. It's red when ripe and has big, flat seeds. They make good jelly, or, when combined with applesauce, a very good cranberry apple jelly.
Here are lichens of a different color. Nestled in soapberries and a dwarf spruce are some wild roses. These are Sitka roses, also sometimes called Nootka roses and prickly roses.
See a lot of moose along the Russian because of the willows and shrubs and other good forage. In spring you can tell how deep the snow accumulation was the past winter by the level the twigs and branches have been cropped down to.
At this level we have different vegetation. These are dwarf dogwoods. If you look closely at one of these, you can see what a good flower arranger nature is. That bloom is surrounded by a rosette of 6 leaves, as though it's been made deliberately into a posy, the way a florist would. This dogwood only grows a few inches above the ground, and it covers large swaths, so it makes a great ground cover. It also has really pretty berries on it, just like a dogwood tree would in the lower 48. You get bunches of red berries in the center where that bloom was. And people around here sometimes call it bunch berries. Here, mixed in with the dogwoods, is a plant called horsetail. Horsetail, in spite of its beauty, is very unpopular with Alaska gardeners because they consider it invasive. But we think it's absolutely lovely, and it's not only lovely, but it's useful too. It has silica in it, and sourdoughs in the early days used to use it to scrub their pots and pans because of that. A lot of Alaska is temperate rainforest. We're a little off the coast here, so it's not as thick here as it is in other places, but you can see the moss on the trees, and you can see how shaded it is in there. In southeastern, where there's lots more rain, the deer moss grows feet long hanging off the branches. These stems with the little pink flowers growing up along them are wintergreen. They grow a foot to maybe 18 inches. These are star gentians. This is an Alaska poppy. They grow in some really tough conditions, including in gravel slopes and even in driveways. One of the things that I like best about these is their seed pods. They're like little salt shakers, and when the wind blows, they spread seeds around from a shaker-like shape. These bluebells are smaller than the bluebells of Scotland. They're sometimes called chiming bells. One of the really interesting things about them is that although they're blue when they're bloomed out, their buds are pink, so they change color in the process of blooming. These wild geraniums are growing along the bank of the Russian River. You can probably hear the river in the background. You may be thinking to yourself that they don't look much like the geraniums you know, but what we call geraniums, the cultivated ones, are actually pelargoniums. This is some sort of an ancestor, though, I believe.
This is an elderberry bush. I've always believed the plant to be poisonous, but I'm told the flowers and the pulp of the berries are not. Bright red baneberry clusters always remind me of Christmas ornaments. Baneberries also sometimes come in white, but I've never seen those. When we were new to Alaska, we gathered a load of baneberries thinking we'd make muffins and add them like raisins or cranberries. If we hadn't checked first, we'd have started a mass poisoning incident. This berry spike is produced by the Devil's Club plant. The plant is a curse of east and south central Alaska. The underside of the leaves and the berries have close-packed thorny spines that are said to create serious irritation. These ferns grow up to 4 feet or higher. One of our rituals of spring is to gather a cupful of the fiddleheads to saute in butter and garlic. In Alaska, almost every plant is food for something. Moose eat about anything green, including twigs and bark. Birds eat seeds, pine cones, even baneberries. This flower is called goat's beard. It grows up to about 4 feet high, and it grows mostly along streams and in moist places and along the coast of Alaska. The coastal areas just to the north of the Kenai show a marked transition to a very different but equally beautiful and impressive vegetation.
We're on the Winter Creek Trail, which winds from Girdwood, Alaska out to the Winter Creek Valley and the Winter Creek Gorge. On its way, it passes through the northernmost edge of the range of the Alaska Sitka spruce. This area is reminiscent of the redwood forests along the California coast. There's no understory trees at all. There's just tall spruces. It's a really bright sunny day today. There's not a cloud in the sky. But these spruce make such an effective canopy that it's really quite dark and shaded down in here, just mixed with an occasional patch of sun that filters through. This trail we're on is part of the Iditarod Trail that gold seekers took from Seward to Nome a century ago. It's very quiet now, but it's interesting to think of the activity there must have been a century ago. One of the wonderful aspects of the Winter Creek Trail is that it is just lined with blueberries. There are thousands and thousands of plants. It's a wonderful place to come and pick them.
Further down the trail, the thundering waterfalls and cascades of Winter Creek Gorge. Night sounds and lengthening shadows means it's time to end the walk and go home.